They say that love is blind, but they never tell you what happens when your vision finally comes back. They never tell you how much the light hurts your eyes when you finally see the person you loved for who they truly are. If you had asked me 3 years ago, I would have told you that Mark was my forever. We were the couple that everyone else wanted to be. We met in college when we had absolutely nothing but cheap coffee and big dreams. I was studying marketing, and he was a brilliant software developer with an idea that he swore was going to change the world. He was charming, driven, and he had this way of looking at me that made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. Music subtly shifts, a slight tone of hope. When we graduated, Mark's dream hit a wall. He needed funding to start his tech company, but no bank would give a loan to a 20-something with no collateral. I remember the night he almost gave up. He sat on the floor of our tiny apartment, holding his head in his hands, telling me that his dream was over. I loved him so much that I couldn't bear to see him defeated, so I made a choice that would eventually destroy my life and then rewrite it. I drained my entire life savings, every single penny I had worked for since I was 16. I sold my car, I took on a second job working nights. I handed him a check for $50,000, it was everything I had. I believe in you, I told him, holding his face in my hands. We are in this together. Mark cried that night. He held me tight and promised me that as soon as the company took off, he would marry me. He promised that we would share the kingdom he was about to build. To make it official, we drew up the incorporation papers together. Because I provided 100% of the initial funding, the lawyer suggested I retain a 51% ownership stake on paper. Mark laughed and signed it without a second thought. It's all yours anyway, he said. I filed that piece of paper in a dusty cabinet and completely forgot about it. I was just happy to see him smile, but I didn't realize that I wasn't building a kingdom for us. I was building a castle for a king who was about to lock me outside the gates. For the first 2 years, things were incredibly hard, but we survived. I worked exhausting hours at my corporate job to pay our rent and buy our groceries while Mark poured everything into his startup. And then, the breakthrough happened. Mark's software caught the attention of a major venture capital firm. Suddenly, the struggles were over. The company exploded. Within 6 months, they went from working out of a garage to a massive glass office downtown. The money started rolling in. I was so proud of him. I thought our time had finally come. I thought it was time for us to finally live the life we had dreamed of. But as the company grew, Mark started to shrink away from me. At first, it was just the little things. He stopped asking about my day. He started coming home at midnight, claiming he was stuck in endless meetings. He upgraded his wardrobe to designer suits, bought a luxury sports car, and started attending high society networking events. When I asked if I could come with him to a major gala, he looked at my simple evening dress and hesitated. Emma, these are very important investors, he said, his voice cold and flat. It's going to be really boring business talk. You wouldn't fit in with this crowd. It's better if you stay home. It felt like a slap in the face, but I told myself he was just stressed. I told myself that success changes people temporarily and he would come back to me. I made excuses for him because when you love someone, you will bend over backwards to justify their terrible behavior. Then, the late nights turned into entire weekends away on business trips. He changed the password on his phone. Whenever he received a text, he would place his phone face down on the table. If I walked into the room while he was on a call, he would immediately hang up or walk outside. My intuition was screaming at me. Every alarm bell in my head was ringing. But I was so terrified of losing the man I had sacrificed everything for, I chose to ignore the smoke even as the fire was burning me alive. Our 5-year anniversary was approaching. I decided I was going to push the doubts away and remind him of who we used to be. I cooked his favorite meal, bought an expensive bottle of wine, and dressed up. But as I was setting the table, his iPad, which was synced to his phone, lit up on the kitchen counter. I wasn't trying to snoop, I swear I wasn't, but the screen flashed brightly in the dim room and the preview of the message was impossible to miss. It was from a contact saved as Chloe. The message read, "Can't wait for tonight, baby. Have you told her you're leaving yet?" My blood ran cold, the floor vanished beneath my feet. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock the tablet, but I did. I opened the messages. I read through months of conversations. Chloe wasn't just anybody, she was the daughter of the lead investor who had funded Mark's company. They had been seeing each other for over a year, but the cheating wasn't even the worst part. It was the way he talked about me. Emma is just a reminder of when I was poor, one of his messages read. She's dead weight, she doesn't fit into my new life, I'm going to drop her as soon as the merger goes through next month. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The man I had starved for, the man I had given my life savings to, saw me as nothing but a stepping stone. Suddenly, the front door opened. Mark walked in, laughing on his phone. He saw me standing there, holding his iPad with tears streaming down my face. He didn't look panicked. He didn't look sorry. He just sighed like I was an inconvenience. "So you looked," he said, his voice completely void of emotion. "Is it true?" I whispered, my voice breaking. "A year, Mark, a whole year." He walked into the kitchen, poured himself a glass of the wine I had bought for our anniversary, and took a sip. "Look, Emma, let's be adults about this," he said coldly. "We're different people now. I'm running a multi-million-dollar company and you're still exactly where you were 5 years ago. I need someone who understands my world. Chloe is a partner, you were just a phase." I was shattered. I asked him about the money I gave him, the sacrifices I made. He laughed, an actual, genuine laugh. "I'll write you a check for the 50 grand tomorrow. Consider it a return on your little investment. Now pack your things, my name is on the lease. I want you out by the weekend." He broke my heart into a million pieces, stepped on them, and walked out the door without looking back. For 3 days, I didn't eat. I barely slept. I packed my belongings into cardboard boxes, crying until my eyes were swollen shut. I moved into my sister's spare bedroom, feeling like an absolute failure. I had nothing. No savings, no fiancé, no future. He had taken it all. I was ready to give up. I was ready to crawl into a hole and let him win. But on the 4th day, something inside me snapped. I was unpacking a box of old documents looking for my passport when a manila folder fell out onto the floor. It was old and slightly yellowed at the edges. I opened it. It was the original incorporation papers for his company, the ones we signed all those years ago in our tiny apartment. My eyes scanned the legal jargon until they stopped on one specific line. Majority shareholder, Emma Hayes, 51%. Mark was so blinded by his new wealth, his new investors, and his own arrogance that he had completely forgotten the foundation his company was built on. He had spent the last 2 years expanding the business, diluting other people's shares, and bringing in new partners. But because I was the original founder on paper and I had never signed any transfer of ownership, my 51% stake was legally untouchable. I didn't own a piece of the company, I owned the entire controlling interest. Mark wasn't the king, he was just my employee. The sadness instantly vanished, the tears dried up, a cold, sharp clarity washed over me. I didn't want to cry anymore, I wanted justice. I didn't call him, I didn't text him. Silence is the most terrifying weapon you can use against a narcissist. Instead, I took the folder and went straight to the best corporate lawyer in the city. The lawyer looked over the documents, verified their authenticity, and looked up at me with a slow, calculating smile. "Ms. Hayes," he said, "your ex-fiancé is about to sign a $50 million merger next Friday. He thinks he's selling this company, but legally, he can't sell a single desk in that office without your signature." "I don't want to just stop the sale," I told the lawyer, my voice completely steady. "I want to take it all." The plan was set into motion. My lawyer quietly audited the company's financials. We discovered that Mark had been reckless. He had been using company funds to pay for his luxury cars, his vacations with Chloe, and his expensive lifestyle. He had breached his fiduciary duty in a dozen different ways. Friday arrived, the day of the big merger. Mark had rented out the penthouse conference room of a luxury hotel to sign the paperwork. It was a massive event. Chloe's father, the lead investor, was there. The buyers were there. Champagne was waiting on ice. Mark was dressed in a custom-tailored suit, looking incredibly smug, ready to walk away with millions of dollars and his new, wealthy bride-to-be. I wore a sharp crimson-red blazer, I curled my hair, I put on my favorite heels. I didn't look like the broken girl he kicked out of his apartment, I looked like a boss. My lawyer and I walked into the hotel, past the security, and took the elevator up to the penthouse. The doors opened. The conference room was buzzing with laughter and handshakes. Mark was standing at the head of a massive glass table holding a fancy gold pen, right about to sign the final transfer agreement. I pushed the double glass doors open. They hit the walls with a loud crack. Every head in the room turned. The laughter died instantly. Mark looked up and the color completely drained from his face. He looked like he had just seen a ghost. "Emma," he stammered, dropping the pen. What are you doing here?" Security, who let her in? Chloe sneered at me from across the room. "Is this the crazy ex-girlfriend you told me about, Mark? Have someone throw her out." I didn't blink. I walked slowly across the expensive carpet, my heels clicking loudly in the dead silent room. I stopped right at the head of the table, looking Mark dead in the eye. "I'm not the crazy ex-girlfriend, Chloe," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the room. "I'm the boss." My lawyer stepped forward and began handing out copies of a thick legal file to the investors, the buyers, and finally, to Mark. "What is this nonsense?" Chloe's father demanded, looking at the papers. "That," my lawyer announced smoothly, "is the original and binding incorporation document of this company. It states that my client, Ms. Emma Hayes, is the sole owner of 51% of the voting shares. Mr. Mark Vance does not have the legal authority to sign this merger. This sale is officially halted." The room erupted into chaos. The buyers looked furious. Chloe's father turned dark red and glared at Mark. "Vance, what is the meaning of this? You told me you own this company." Mark was trembling. He looked frantically at the papers, his hands shaking so violently he dropped them on the table. This is a mistake. That was 5 years ago. She didn't do anything for this company. I built this." "You built it with my money, Mark," I said, stepping closer to him, lowering my voice so only he and the board could hear. "You built it on my sacrifices. While you were playing CEO, you forgot who bought the bricks." "Emma, please," Mark whispered, his arrogant facade completely shattering. He was sweating now. His eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. "We can talk about this. I'll give you 10%. I'll give you $5 million right now. Just let me sign." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had called me dead weight, the man who had thrown me away like garbage to upgrade his lifestyle. "I don't want 5 million, Mark," I said coldly. "I want everything." My lawyer then pulled out the second stack of papers, the financial audit. "Furthermore," my lawyer announced to the room, "Ms. Hayes, as the majority shareholder, has conducted a full audit. Mr. Vance has been embezzling company funds to finance his personal lifestyle. We have documented proof of corporate fraud." Chloe's father slammed his fist on the table. "You stole from my investment fund," he roared at Mark. Chloe backed away from Mark, looking at him with absolute disgust. "You're a fraud," she spat. Mark fell into the leather chair, burying his face in his hands. It was over. The buyers packed up their briefcases and walked out. Chloe's father threatened to sue him into the ground. Chloe took off her engagement ring, threw it on the glass table, and walked out without looking back. In less than 10 minutes, Mark's entire empire had burned to the ground. I leaned down, placing my hands on the armrests of his chair, forcing him to look at me. "You told me I was just a phase, Mark," I whispered. "You told me you were dropping dead weight. Well, consider yourself dropped." "As majority owner," I stated loudly for the legal record, "I am officially terminating Mark Vance as CEO, effective immediately. Pack your things, Mark. I want you out of my building by the weekend." I walked out of that hotel penthouse feeling lighter than I had in years. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Over the next few months, Mark lost absolutely everything. Because of the embezzlement charges, his assets were frozen. The luxury car was repossessed. The expensive apartment was gone. He tried calling me dozens of times, leaving desperate, crying voicemails begging for forgiveness, begging for a second chance. I never answered. I blocked his number and erased him from my life completely. As for the company, I hired a brilliant, ethical CEO to take over the day-to-day operations. The business stabilized, and I eventually sold my 51% stake to a massive tech conglomerate for a life-changing amount of money. I didn't just survive his betrayal, I turned it into my empire. When you give your heart and soul to someone, you expect them to protect it. It is a devastating reality when the person you build up uses their new height to look down on you. But here is the lesson I learned and what I want you to take away from this story. Never let anyone convince you that your loyalty is a weakness. Never let someone who used you make you feel like you are worth less than you are. Mark thought my kindness made me stupid. He thought my love made me blind. He mistook my quiet support for powerlessness. He broke my heart, yes, but in doing so, he woke up a version of me that he was not prepared to face. Sometimes, the universe removes people from your life in the most painful way possible just to show you that you never needed them in the first place. You are not dead weight, you are the foundation, and if someone tries to tear you down, remember, you always have the power to shut them out in the cold.